Ooh, diving into the Finnish economic crisis of the 1990s.
Yeah.
It's a bit like, I don't know, it's like opening a time capsule
Huh.
from like the peak of, MC Hammer Pants
Right.
and dial-up internet. We're talking about a time of massive change, not just for Finland, but globally.
Yep.
And honestly, you can really see how those changes from back then are still affecting us today.
Oh, for sure. And the amount of information you've dug up for us to go through. I mean, wow, we've got academic papers coming out of our ears, economic data,
Yeah.
even firsthand accounts.
It's like everyone and their dog has a theory about why Finland's economy took that nosedive back then.
Right.
But to really wrap our heads around it, we
Yeah.
really need to zoom out and get the bigger picture, right?
Absolutely. I think a good place to start is that before the crisis, Finland was all in on a fixed exchange rate system.
Okay.
You might be thinking, fixed, stable, that's good, right?
That's stable.
But history tells a different story. Even the source we're looking at points out that, at least for Finland, a fixed exchange rate usually just meant it was fixed until, well, till the next devaluation.
So the writing was on the wall,
Yeah.
but they just, I don't know, maybe they didn't want to read it. Why cling to this fixed rate if it was so, I don't know, shaky?
Well, back then it was all about stability. It was seen as the way to keep inflation in check. But it also meant Finland didn't have a lot of wiggle room when the global economy started doing its own thing. And things were changing fast, especially with all the financial market deregulation in the 80s.
Deregulation. That's a blast from the past. Right. Wasn't that when things really started to, I don't know about interesting, maybe a little too interesting?
Exactly. Deregulation, among other things, led to this, explosion of lending.
Yeah.
Especially in real estate. And the source even talks about how any little change in demand had a huge impact on housing prices. Basically, too many people with money wanted too few apartments.
Oh, so it's like a bubble.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Classic bubble.
Like blowing air into a balloon more and more, but eventually it's got to pop.
Right.
And this wasn't just about people wanting to buy houses, right? This was the entire Finnish economy getting caught in the current.
You got it. Think of the housing market as just one symptom of a much bigger issue. The whole economy was overheating, fueled by easy credit and people taking risks, thinking they could make a quick buck. There's this great quote in the source from Matti Rainki and Ramola Skivi, and they were already calling it a casino economy back then.
I love that. A casino economy, everyone's winning big, riding high, living the good life. But, the house always wins in the end.
But in this case, the house winning meant that Finland's economy was in for a rude awakening. Actually, there's another quote here that really captures the, I don't know, maybe the anxiety of the time. It's from Kiander and Vartia, written in '98, and they were seriously worried about financial institutions basically playing with fire, using borrowed money to make risky bets in the stock market. Talk about a gamble.
Talk about a gamble gone wrong. So let me get this straight. We've got this boom in full swing.
Yeah.
Warning signs are practically neon, but no one wants to stop the party.
Well, it's not quite as simple as that.
Okay.
Well, it's easy to say that looking back, But at the time, there was this really strong belief that Finland could weather the storm, that they could get through it without any drastic measures.
So what happened when the music stopped? When the Finnish economy had to face reality?
Well, that's when sticking with that fixed exchange rate really came back to bite them. Remember how we were talking about Finland's history with devaluations?
Yeah.
This time around, the government was dead set on keeping the fixed rate. They thought it was the only way to keep things stable.
Even though it was basically built on quicksand, right?
Pretty much. The source even talks about this guy, Markku Puntila, a big shot at the Bank of Finland, and he was totally against devaluation no matter what.
Wow. Talk about sticking to your guns, huh? Even as a ship sinking.
Right. They try this thing called internal devaluation, which is basically trying to get prices and wages to drop within Finland to make them more competitive, but without actually changing the currency's value.
Okay.
And they tried to make this big agreement, a societal contract, to get everyone to agree to these really tough austerity measures.
Yeah, I can imagine that was a tough sell. Hey, things are bad. Let's make everyone's lives even harder.
Right. Asking people to tighten their belts when everything feels so uncertain is, well, it's not easy.
Yeah.
And in the end, it was just too little, too late. They couldn't avoid devaluing the marka forever.
So they finally had to do it. But by then, the crisis was already in full swing. Even that couldn't magically fix everything.
Exactly. It was like trying to put a Band-Aid on a broken leg.
So the bubble burst, the house won, and Finland was left to deal with the economic hangover. All this talk about economics is fascinating and all, but I'm really curious about the people, you know? What did all of this mean for everyday Finns? What were the consequences? It's easy to get lost in all the economic jargon, but we have to remember we're talking about real people.
Oh, absolutely.
This wasn't just numbers on a spreadsheet. The source actually uses a quote from someone who lived through it, and it really drives that home. They said, and I'm paraphrasing here, "We were raised to believe work was everything, our only purpose, and when you lose that, you lose your foundation."
Wow.
Yeah.
That really hits hard.
Oh.
And it makes you think about the psychological impact of something like this. You know?
Yeah.
Like, imagine having your whole world just flipped upside down. It's
Right.
not even just about paying the bills. It's about, like, losing part of who you are.
Exactly. And we're not talking about a handful of people, right? This was widespread unemployment.
Mm.
What happened to families, to communities? How did they cope?
It put a huge strain on, well, everything, really, especially their welfare state,
Right.
which, I mean, before the crisis, it was designed to be the safety net.
Right.
They had health care, unemployment benefits, Social Security.
All the things you hope for.
Exactly. But when everyone needs that safety net at the same time, what happens?
Right. It's going to be stretched thin.
Exactly.
So what happened?
The source goes into some detail about this, like analyzing how different groups were affected. And no surprise, the people who were already struggling before, they were hit the hardest.
Of course.
Income inequality just like exploded.
Yeah.
And the effects of that unemployment, I mean, things like poverty, feeling isolated, even health problems, those things stuck around long after the initial shock.
It's like a ripple effect.
Exactly.
And a stark reminder that when economies tank, not everyone feels it the same way.
Right.
So we've got this picture of economic hardship, social upheaval, long-term consequences. It's pretty bleak.
It was a tough time, yeah.
But I'm sensing a but coming here. There's more to the story, right?
You know, there is. Even in the middle of all that hardship, the source actually found these incredible stories of like resilience, adaptation, people finding new ways to make ends meet, to support each other.
Wow. Inspiring.
Yeah.
Finding opportunity in the ashes, as they say.
Yeah, really. It's amazing what people can do when they have to.
So we've done our deep dive. We've resurfaced from all this information about the Finnish economic crisis.
Right.
What are the key takeaways? What can we learn from all of this, from their experience?
I think the main thing is, even though the Finnish crisis was unique in a lot of ways, there are still lessons here for everyone. The source even compares it to other economic crises around the world.
Okay.
And there are some common threads, like fixed exchange rates, too much lending with no control, deregulation.
So basically the same mistakes keep happening.
Unfortunately, yeah. I think what Finland's experience really highlights is how important it is to have good financial regulations, sustainable economic policies, and just being willing to adapt.
Yeah, to roll with the punches.
Exactly. Because, and I think this is really important, behind all the economic jargon, the data, all that, there are real people.
Right.
Their lives were disrupted, their dreams were put on hold, but ultimately, they were resilient, they were innovative, they didn't give up.
So as we wrap up here, think about what we can learn from the past, both the good and the bad.
Absolutely.
Are we making some of those same mistakes today? It's something to think about.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Finnish economic crisis of the 1990s.